can't believe I'm about to say this, but believe it or not, former Vice President Dick Cheney has actually endorsed Kamala Harris. I can't make this up, folks. I know it's crazy, it's bizarre, but it is happening. So this is another Republican that is endorsing Kamala Harris, but not just any Republican. We're talking about someone that is a war criminal. We're talking about someone that has done a number of things during their time in the Bush administration that I do want to highlight. And I do want to highlight certain things that he did throughout his political career and why I do not believe this is a good move for the Democratic Party. What we are witnessing is the Democratic Party again moving further towards the right. Let's go ahead and get started with this clip here from MSNBC announcing the bizarre, crazy news.
Former Republican Vice President and Defense Secretary Dick Cheney is backing Kamala Harris. That marks one of her most high-ranking Republican endorsements in this campaign, probably the most iconic. Dick Cheney is an arch-conservative hawk, a GOP icon, a fixture running Republican administrations as chief of staff, and then running their war policies as defense secretary and vice president, most famously during 9/11 and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Those were stints that made him a firebrand folk hero on the right and loathed by most prominent Washington Democrats. Indeed, this news right now tonight would have been unheard of 10 or 15 years ago. And we should remind you, Cheney is far from a never Trumper. He endorsed Donald Trump in 2016. This is a mark amidst this extraordinary shift in American politics. It also completes the Cheney family's unusual evolution. And it did not come during the actual 4 years of Trump's presidency, his governing priorities and mistakes, whatever you think of them. It only came during the battle in the fissure over whether we are going to be a democracy or a coup-run dictatorship in this country. It came.
It's always interesting to me how they talk about whether or not we're going to be a democracy while they are actively removing third-party candidates off of the ballot. Jill Stein was just removed off the Nevada ballot. They're trying to remove her in Georgia. And it's not just her. It's been Cornel West. It's been RFK Jr., et cetera. It is very obvious to me that we do not have a real democracy in this country. And a lot of these corporate news media pundits know this as well. Their job is to convince you that by voting for Kamala Harris, you will be protecting a so-called democracy, a so-called true democracy that we really do not have.
In that period after Trump lost to Joe Biden and fomented an insurrection. You probably recall how Liz Cheney went from the actual Republican leadership working in tandem with Trump to a critic of him, to then chairing the January 6th committee investigating his attack. Now her father joins this stance, which puts democracy above politics or any certain policies. And as a political matter, may be hugely helpful to Kamala Harris in a tight race that includes states where there are people who still really like the Bush-Cheney policies or hearken back to them as a better Republican era than Trumpism. And if that's what they hearken back to, Dick Cheney is telling them, vote for Kamala Harris tonight.
People that like George Bush policies, people who like war, right? Warmongers, more war criminals, those types of people.
Liz and Dick, we should mention, have a long record disagreeing with Kamala Harris on everything from abortion to taxes. But they're saying something here is more important tonight. Liz Cheney actually broke this news in an appearance today with journalist Mark Leibovich.
Dick Cheney, your father, a beloved figure among Democrats for many, many years. Do you, if you know who he will be supporting or who he'll be voting for, do you care to share with us who he might be voting for?
Dick Cheney will be voting for Kamala Harris.
Wow.
Wow is right. You can hear the cheers, which happen to reflect the room she was in. She could have been in a more independent room, and there might have been a mixed reaction, or she could have been in a Republican room, a MAGA room, and people would have had their own reaction. All those reactions, real or imagined, though, reflect the fact that this is a big deal. You heard Leibovich, a straight reporter, saying, wow, this is a big one.
It is definitely a big one, but I do not think that this is a win for the Democratic Party at all. What this is showing you is that the Democratic Party, again, they are more willing to move to the right than they are to move to the actual left, the real left. They're more willing to move towards conservative politics than they are to move towards any type of progressive politics. This is why you see all these different politicians coming out, moderate conservative politicians endorsing Kamala Harris, and Kamala Harris openly accepting that endorsement. What happened to we're not supposed to coalesce with Republicans? What happened to we're not supposed to coalesce with people on the right? What happened to those statements from the Democratic Party? What happened to the liberal media pundits who said you should not entertain the right? Now, all of a sudden, it's okay because it is their candidate and they want their candidate to win. These are just a few of the problems that I have with the two-party system. And more importantly, Max Blumenthal pointed out this as well. Kamala's campaign manager has enthusiastically welcomed the endorsement of Dick Cheney, stating she deeply respects his courage to put country over party. So the Kamala 2024 deeply respects one of the most devious war criminals alive and considers him courageous. Here are just some of the things that Dick Cheney has done. Dick Cheney disseminated fake intelligence linking Saddam Hussein to Al-Qaeda, pushed the WMD hoax, and ordered the unmasking of Valerie Plame as an undercover CIA officer as retaliation for her husband. Ambassador Joe Wilson exposing the Bush administration's lie about Saddam obtaining enriched uranium from Niger. I want to get to this clip here just as a reminder for those who may have forgotten.
No apologies, no regrets from former Vice President Dick Cheney for the harsh CIA interrogation techniques used on terror detainees after 9/11. What the Senate Intelligence Committee labeled torture in its blistering report this past week, the former VP today called necessary as he delivered a powerful counterattack this morning on NBC's Meet the Press. Mr. Cheney took strong exception to that Senate report and, contrary to its conclusions, told our Chuck Todd that the interrogation techniques absolutely worked. NBC's Kristen Welker is at the White House tonight with more on this. Kristen, good evening.
Lester, good evening. Facing heavy criticism after the Senate intelligence report was released this past week, former Vice President Dick Cheney was unapologetic today and said the Bush administration got it right.
He was unapologetic. This is the guy who promoted the Iraq war, the war that was built on a lie, killing all these people, civilians, soldiers, all the people that lost their lives during a war that was built on a lie. This is who Democrats are applauding because he endorsed Kamala Harris. Now, all of a sudden, Dick Cheney is a great guy. We just saw recently that Liz Cheney also gave an endorsement of Kamala Harris. You saw the way the Democratic Party has been praising her ever since she spoke out against Donald Trump. So what this goes to show you is that, once again, you have one corporate warmongering party in this country. The Republican Party, the Democratic Party, it's actually just one corporate warmongering party. And they will go along with anyone that is willing to implement war, that is willing to help the MIC, military industrial complex, and that is willing to back Wall Street, regardless if they're a Republican or a Democrat. We saw this with Nikki Haley, another warmonger. All of a sudden, all these Democrats were okay to go along with Nikki Haley because she wasn't Donald Trump, just simply because of that. Both of these parties backing and supporting wars. You would think we would have learned from the Iraq war. Now, there are a number of people that told me that they couldn't support Joe Biden because he voted for the Iraq war. Now, some of those same people have no problem supporting Kamala Harris, who is a part of the administration funding and aiding the genocide in Gaza, just now received an endorsement from Dick Cheney, the guy who promoted the Iraq war, and has told the American people multiple times that they will not condition any weapons or aid to Israel. Now, all of a sudden, those same people who said they couldn't support Biden because he voted for the Iraq war, have no problem supporting Kamala Harris, who is pro-war. Hear what he says here. Listen to this.
Former Vice President Dick Cheney unwavering in his support for the harsh interrogation tactics that happened on his watch, today ratcheted up his defense on Meet the Press.
I'd do it again in a minute.
Cheney argued the methods, including prolonged periods of...
We'll pause it here. But of course, one of the methods of torture that they were talking about here was, waterboarding, etc. He said he would do it again. He said he would do it again. And this is who the Democratic Party is applauding. This guy who has no apology for the torture methods that were used during the Iraq war. It's unbelievable.
Torture was what the al-Qaeda terrorists did to 3,000 Americans on 9/11. There's no comparison between that and what we did with respect to enhanced interrogation.
A fired-up Cheney called the report politically motivated, and that was his more tempered language.
I won't use the word on your show. It may be family. It's a crock. It's not true.
And he disputed the report's claim that the interrogation tactics provided no credible information.
Absolutely
All of
not.
this information in here, no seed of doubt that whether this worked or not.
It worked. It absolutely did work.
No apology.
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. And this is who people are applauding. Now, I want to show you this. So Kamala Harris, here is Kamala Harris thanking Dick Cheney and referring to him as a well-respected leader. Now, all of a sudden, this guy has gone from being a war criminal, a far-right, dangerous person, cruel guy, to a great leader. Guys, these two parties are playing you. They're playing everybody. Okay. It's not even about the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. It's not even about if you're on the right or if you're on the left. It's about what works for Wall Street, what works for the MIC, and what works for the status quo. And that's what they want in office. They just want to maintain the status quo. So it doesn't matter if that status quo was done by a Republican or if that status quo was done by a Democrat. They just want to maintain the status quo. Listen to this.
Actually, I'm honored to have their endorsement, and I think that what they both, as leaders who are well respected, are making an important statement that it's okay, and if not important, to put country above party. And I'm honored to have their support, and I think it's an important statement right now. A lot of what I think is happening, and I was just talking with some folks here in Pittsburgh about it, is that people are exhausted about the division and the attempts to kind of divide us as Americans. And them stepping up to make this public statement, I think, is courageous, but also for people like the folks I was just talking with, it really reinforces for them that we love our country and we have more in common than what separates us.
Really interesting, huh? Really interesting. She talks about the division there. Isn't this the same woman that told Charlemagne the God not to start talking like a Republican because he was criticizing the Biden administration's, ability to actually get bills passed? Isn't that the same woman who said that? But she says, oh, no, we don't want to focus on any division. I want to show you who Dick Cheney really was, because people, I don't think a lot of people know some of the things that Dick Cheney has done. Dick Cheney opposed releasing Nelson Mandela. Dick Cheney opposed releasing Nelson Mandela. No way in hell, no way should Kamala Harris have accepted that endorsement from Dick Cheney. Here's what you say. I appreciate that, but I cannot accept this endorsement due to your positions on key core issues that are against where I stand. But then that brings up the question, where does she actually stand? She has no platform on her website still today. She is running on vibes. She's an empty suit. She's just running on the fact that she's not Donald Trump. And I'm going to give this warning to everybody because I saw the Professor Alan Lichtman, already predicted that Kamala Harris is going to win the presidential election in 2024. Now, apparently this guy has never gotten it wrong. Kamala Harris's administration, you're already starting to see what it is going to be like. I can see a Kamala Harris administration that is pro-war, backed by all these war hawks, and that she actually wouldn't be in charge of and not running. It would most likely be run by the Obamas. It would most likely be run by the Clintons. Why do you think all these war criminals are coming out to support and back Kamala Harris? Here's another thing that Dick Cheney did. He opposed Head Start programs. A lot of people don't know this. So if you care about education, you care about, these kids being in situations where they have under-resourced schools, you cannot approve this. He opposed MLK Day. Why the hell would you oppose that? If it's not about division and it's about unity, and that's something that MLK wanted, why would you vote against that, Dick Cheney? So Kamala Harris is saying that we cannot have the division and it's about country over party. But at one point in time, Dick Cheney was totally about the division. It was not about country over party. He didn't even want you to have an MLK Day, Kamala. Why is that? You stood there on the debate stage and you told everybody that Joe Biden's issue and his position on segregation was very problematic for you because that little girl was you. And then you went on and had no problem being the vice president for the same guy that you said troubled you so much because of his racist issues and his racist past. But you can jump on board with Dick Cheney and accept his endorsement. Of course, the one I think that a lot of us know is that Dick Cheney promoted the Iraq war. That's the big one. And I said, but people are applauding him for endorsing Kamala Harris. Over 13,000 people like this tweet. My account is not large on Twitter. The Democratic Party is just willing to accept anything as long as it's not Donald Trump, that they won't even push back on Dick Cheney. This is not a good look for the Democratic Party. And if they were to ask my advice, I would tell you need to get back to the party that you used to be. Because at this point, the only difference separating both of these parties is abortion, woman's right to choose. And there are even some conservatives that approve of a woman's right to choose. LGBTQ rights. I'm waiting for other things. And of course, some of the racist laws. So they're separated by social issues. They are together. They are unified on war, Wall Street, the billionaire class. They don't even want to give you health care. Neither party wants to give everyone health care. So if she can accept an endorsement from Dick Cheney, that right there should be a red flag to you, ladies and gentlemen, of what her presidency is going to be like. I cannot kid you wrong. I cannot even imagine. I'm here to remind you once again, you don't have to vote for Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. I will be supporting Jill Stein. You know why? Because Jill Stein has a platform that has earned my vote. If you like what you see, don't forget to like, sub, and share.